Everybody hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I'm really not sure why I actually need to do this talk. I think Norman, Mike, and Jeremy did an excellent job covering about everything I was going to say. So, in lieu of that and brevity, I know that y'all need after lunch that you probably, think I'm going to give a short talk, but you also have to remember I'm in extension, so, we like to hear ourselves talk for a very long time. So, well, today we'll differ a little bit off the scale because we're getting to short rotation woody crops, and really the essence of short rotation woody crops had beginnings a long time ago. But I thought before I really got started into it, really give you a definition of what I think of short rotation woody crops, and that's been defined as very intensive plantation management of fast growth hardwood species. We included poplars, cottonwood, hybrid poplars, sycamore, black locust, yellow poplar, silver maple, sweet gum, and willows, and today we even cover eucalyptus as well. And you're looking at rotational lengths that are very short. In the Northeast, some as short as 1 year. In the Southeast, we're looking probably in more of the case between 3 and actually 5 years worth of growth out of these trees. Well, what about the history? What is the background? And we've alluded to, Jeremy alluded to a little bit, but I really, and Norman also talked about the Center for Bottomland Hardwoods Research at Stoneville. And really that's where the concept for us in the South came to be with short rotation hardwoods, is that in that aspect between 1950s and the 1970s, that really the heyday for that actual program. Didn't call it short rotation woody crops, but in essence it morphed into that later on through time. In the 70s, if you were in college like I was in the 70s, you remember the oil embargo that happened. I was driving down the road at LSU, and I was used to getting gas at 25 cents a gallon there, and all of a sudden I passed by a station right next to campus, and there was this huge line, and the gas was 72 cents a gallon. And I pulled away and go, who in their right mind would pay 72 cents a gallon for gas? So I just left. I was little did I know what the price would be in the future. But it was a response to the oil embargo, and DOE set about as actually defining what can we do with short rotation woody crops, not so much for transportation fuel at that time, more for bioenergy than anything else. Unfortunately, what was happened is they put all their eggs in the basket of let's grow the material. No eggs in the basket, let's develop the end user for this. And subsequently, what you saw, it fell apart after a short time. Again, like you see today, gasoline prices have come down. Then gasoline prices plummeted again, got more back to normal for what we had at that particular time. And people just weren't interested in it anymore. And so it fell down, a long way set. So we kind of lost touch of it. But there were some people, and Westphal, who I worked for, was one of those individuals that it worked very well in the pulp and paper market, because now you could develop a set of trees on alluvial plantations or upland, if we tried upland sites, in a very short period of time. And in fact, through time, what we found out, it was our best return on investment for all our plantations, including pine as well. But what changed today? Why are we interested in a little more today? Well, we get back to, again, the interest of where we're going with our fossil fuel economy. Where are we going to? We see the negative impacts of fossil fuel, say in climate change, as we talked about today, but also in bioenergy production, the positive aspects of what could happen. We looked at it in 2005 through the billion-ton report from the Department of Energy. Then they looked at it again from the billion-ton update that took place in 2011. If you look at that particular study, what you see in that study is that you don't see forestry actually increasing in terms of biomass. In fact, all you see is energy crops. What you don't see in the report is, if you have to dig through it, if you just read the forestry aspect of it, you would say, well, okay, nothing else is happening in forestry. But in actuality, short rotation woody crops, forest tree species are included in energy crops in there. So you see a huge demand that we need for the actual billion-ton update in there. We see legislation in Europe. The pellet market is here. The pellet market is increasing on a yearly basis by leaps and bounds. You see Drax. You see Inviva pellets going offshore with it. Of course, everything is more toward the actual coastline because its transportation is shorter, get it out quicker, and the material tends to be more traditional based today. It looks at the pine thinnings. Well, why are we looking at our first pine thinnings? That's because the pulpwood market subsequently has gone south on us. The pulpwood market is in Brazil, it's in Uruguay, it's in Chile, it's in China. That's where the pulpwood market is today, or a growing pulpwood market. Can you tell me what was the last time there was actually a pulp and paper plant put into the U.S.? It's been a long, long time that they've put it. You cannot expect to see another one come into the U.S. So the pulpwood market is sort of dying aspect of it. The biomass market has started taking place, but then there's the potential for second generation biofuels, and that's what it hinges on, more what we call lignocellulosic type of biofuel transportation production. We want to move away from ethanol, though. We don't want ethanol because it can't be transported within the existing petrochemical pipelines. The hydrophobic nature of it does not allow us to do that. So what we want to look at is look at biobutanol. Actually, the ability to take that drop-in fuel now and replace it in our combustion engine. But for our short rotation woody crops, we're looking at potential production of significant amounts, always has been on a per acre basis, no matter whether we did it for the pulpwood industry or whether we're doing it for the biomass industry. The case is all the same. Grow as much as we can on as little land as we can, with as little impact as we can. That means we're not trying to impact any food source. We don't want to take agricultural land out and put it into biomass. They set ethanol production at 15 million gallons because of the impact it was making on corn. So what we're looking at, we're trying to use marginal land for what we call fast growth hardwoods today, or less or more forestry type of ground, but it also lends us to less impact in our natural stands as well. Easier to grow it on a small scale basis and a lot of potential, high growth potential of these trees, rather than actually take it out of our natural stands, even if we're using residue. So what are the advantages of short rotation woody crops? Well, plantations can be located very closely to the facility. We can decrease our transportation costs, one, which is considerable, as you know. If you're looking at a pulpwood plant that has maybe using 2 million tons of roundwood a year, its procurement zone is 150 miles. If I'm looking at a pellet plant, my procurement zone is probably going to be 30 miles out there. The closer into the mill, the less transportation there is. For Zeochem on the Pacific Northwest, they have Greenwood Resources. The mill is right next to the plantation, in the center actually of the plantation. Very little transportation costs and greater saving on carbon dioxide footprints, they provided an area that is dedicated really to maximizing biomass potential. That goes with what Mike was talking about. You still have to match your species to the site because you're still talking about hardwoods. You want to reduce or eliminate the impact of biomass production on our natural stands. We'd like to take that away from our natural stands completely. Then we could actually produce more high quality feedstock because you're growing it specifically in selection specifically for a specific product that would increase the potential of that feedstock. So you're increasing the impact of that feedstock and just not a generalized amount of feedstock. So what are the factors that really affect the viability of short rotation woody crops? Well, establishment cost yields need to be low. Yields, and when they're high, yields have to be extremely high. You have to have increased survival, increased growth rates, and increased disease resistance. I don't say anything about insect impacts because I've never seen anything genetically tied to insect impacts when they actually get to the epidemic proportions. Reduction in our establishment costs will provide a lower cost feedstock, and that's what, if you talk to the engineers, that's what they want, a lower cost feedstock. So We're still looking at pulpwood type of stumpage, but we need lower cost feedstock, thus lowering the production costs. And one thing I'd like to hone in on, and I'm actually writing papers on this right now, the term genetic engineering for dedicated energy plantation needs to become a positive and not a negative. We need to not stand by the wayside as foresters anymore and allow the agriculture aspect to use GMO for everything else, and yet we stand by where we can't use GMO at all within our crops. That has to change as well. So to make them economically viable in establishment, and as well as first year weed control, needs to be minimized. That means we need to use chemicals. There's some chemicals out there for control of woody material. You need to control perennial vines as well as your major site prep treatment. You know, looking at currently what is effective for establishment, really not much in a lot of cases. Mike alluded to ouse. Well, ouse is good for sweet gum and ouse is good for oaks. Ouse is not good for cottonwood. Ouse is not good for a lot of other species. If you put ouse on cottonwood, I can assure you, it will die. No doubt about it. And if you have a site of 7 to 8 pH, if you put more than a half an ounce of ouse out there on it, you'll kill it very, very easily. Gold 2XL is what we use as a pre-emerge, but it actually breaks down in heat. So gold is really temporary aspect. More chemicals like Squadron or Broadstar, where they actually don't break down in heat rapidly, should be utilized. There's a lot of chemicals out there like the diclosium, which is a peanut chemical. It's strong arm, does a very good job on it, but who can afford it at $59 an ounce with a recommended rate of 9 ounces per acre? You know, there's nothing that you can really afford there whatsoever. So we don't actually even utilize strong arm, even though I can get it for free, because there's no reason or anybody would actually utilize that. I still don't understand exactly how the peanut guys make money off of it when you look at that. In most cases, the good thing, unlike oak, for the most part, there's genetically improved stock out there. And it's available for poplars. It's getting available for willows. It's available for sweet gum. It's available for yellow poplar. So there is genetically improved material out there available today. Again, you have to realize when you work with hardwoods, and I can't overemphasize this, that you have to match your species to your site. We utilize a Baker Broadfoot. The first thing I do when I actually put my plantations in, I actually look at the web soil survey. I don't let it all tie in with the web soil survey. Then I go back and take the Baker Broadfoot method, and then I look at that again, and I determine, is that site suitable for the species that I'm going to be utilized? Because now we're looking more at the soil physical condition of that specific site out there, the nutrient availability, the moisture availability during the growing season, as well as the aeration of that particular soil. If you put, say, I have a lot of people come to me, I want to grow cottonwood, it's on a pine site, and you look at what's out there, you may have 4 inches of topsoil, good topsoil, or 6 inches of good topsoil. Well, that's not a good cottonwood site. Don't plant it on that particular site. Same thing with eucalyptus. If I'm using eucalyptus, I better be planting it only in the very lower portion of the Gulf Coastal Plain for that. You move it very much northward, you can expect a lot of death that will occur, a lot of mortality that would occur. Also, you need to be aware of the problems, especially of diseases. Hybrid poplar, a lot of people want to skip over cottonwood and go straight to hybrid poplar. And there are a lot of different taxa, or a lot of different hybrids that are out there. Unfortunately, every one of those are susceptible to Septoria massiva, which is a canker disease. I'll show you some pictures later on. If you're planting the LMAV anywhere in Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas with that material, you can expect hybrid poplars will die out of that because of Septoria massiva. All herbicides, of course, as I mentioned earlier, are not suitable across all hardwood species, so you have to be careful. You know, sweet gum, you can use a lot of ouse. You can actually spray ouse over the top of it, even when it's leafed out, and still have good control of your material and very little damage to your trees. Populus, I do that, I'm just going to kill it. If I use glyphosate the first year, I better be extremely careful. I've even utilized glyphosate under shielded conditions, and I developed, say, a hole in my shield in a couple of places, and I killed an awful lot of trees in that situation as well. Typical plantations really should be designed today to use chemicals, but you need to allow for mechanical cultivation during that first growing season. After the first growing season, you're free. If those trees have grown well, your trees should be somewhere in the neighborhood of six foot or so. At that time, 6 to 14 foot of height growth. And you should be competition free. The second year you go into it, there's no reason to go into the stand whatsoever. Those trees are in a free to go position as well. Trees become stressed from herbaceous competition and short rotation woody crops. You might as well take a disc to the site and actually restart over again. They will not recover. We had drip irrigation systems at West Waco, about 2,500 acres of drip irrigation under it. When we had storms come through, it hit the computers, the irrigation went out. If that storm occurred in July, we were not able to get water on. It was a sand type of culture. Those trees set bud in July and never grew again till the very next year. And so off-site planting, inability to keep it weed-free, stresses the tree, results in poor growth not only the first year, but every year within the rotation as well. They do not catch up. Spacing is greatly going to depend on your objective of species and rotation length. Right now, I use cottonwood. We use it at a 9 by 6 foot spacing with cottonwood. That will give you about a 4 to 5 year rotation length out of it and good production rates. You can go back and you can look at some of the old work that was done at the Center for Bottomland Hardwoods and see that Kennard and Johnson had actually done very similar type of work at spacings from 4 by 4 all the way up to 20 by 20. In essence, they said the same thing. That will actually maintain itself for that 4 year period or so. Our whole program is really focused on whole tree harvesting. It wasn't only on stem wood, or it wasn't only on clean chips. It was on whole tree harvesting, and that we were shooting for yields on a per acre basis of about 20 green tons per acre per year out there. So very high type of yields. As time has gone by, though, we began moving away from the whole tree material because with biofuels, in essence, the engineers are looking more at the clean chip size material. So whole tree harvesting has not been appropriate in a lot of cases. It's still very appropriate for the pellet market, even though ash content has to be low. You won't get a buildup in ash content unless you have a lot of dirt or fines that come into it. So we're actually looking at a little bit longer rotations than what we actually started off looking at. Lose genetic selection through the use of improved genetic stock, and you can get that material in a lot of different places, and it's best for method to control our disease portion. If I'm selecting individuals, they should have good Melamsura rust resistance, good Marsanina ground sprout resistance to it, and that all should be determined in the actual selection of your individual clones, and the nursery person that has that can actually tell you that information as well. As I said before, insect control is really best handled at the time of planting to lessen to the impact. Right now, what we do is we actually take our cuttings, both cottonwood and willow, for those cases where they're unrooted sticks, basically, and we're soaking them in a mixture of imidacloprid. It's a Meyer Pro, and a Meyer Pro is very expensive, but when you soak the cuttings with a combination of water and a Meyer Pro, what you get is a systemic that's built into the tree now and lasts for a couple of years through growth. So it's a very good chemical to utilize. The cost of it is now less than a penny, per tree. And it lasts for at least 2 full growing seasons. In terms of harvesting, regeneration, smaller machinery has been developed. The New Holland harvester that's shown here in this picture, they utilize a lot. I know Enviva utilizes Mobark type of chippers, inwood chippers out there. Prentice has some as well. But then you have to think about the timing of harvest, because you want coppice regeneration, and coppice regeneration is only going to happen between October and May. You cannot be harvesting June, July, and August and expect to get good coppice regeneration. That's not going to happen. And in case of our material, we'd like to see it cut down every third or fourth year, but we would like to have it coppice regenerate for basically 4 to 7 rotations before we actually reinvigorate the entire area with new clones probably. So if I break it down to the various aspects by species, what are the top performers out there? I've listed eastern cottonwood, hybrid poplar, willow, sycamore, and sweet gum, and at the very bottom, eucalyptus. For growth rates, the #1 tree, of course, is eucalyptus, but it's limited. It's very limited into a very small space. Eastern cottonwood and hybrid poplar. Cottonwood a little more limited than hybrid poplar may be limited. You have to move away from the LMAV zone for hybrid poplar to actually work out, right? So anyway, willow, growth rates of willow are not as good. The diameter height ratio is not as good as cottonwood is. And so what's one thing that's kind of come into play as we're developing our willow, we're looking at getting more diameter into our selections. But sycamore growth rates, are okay. Sweet gum, you can expect, 5 tons per acre per year, basically on sweet gums. So anyway, site adaptability, of course, the worst would be eastern cottonwood and eucalyptus because they're very, very small area. Disease resistance, we can select for. Sweet gum has the best disease resistance. Really don't know much about eucalyptus right now. That's still in question. Hybrid poplar and sycamore are the worst. You should not be planting any sycamore right now. There's a couple of diseases we have no actual selection for right now and should not be utilizing sycamore. Rooting, you see the #1 tree out there is willow, and unlike what Mike was saying today, green ash, that you could actually just put the seed on the ground and it roots. I will tell you for sure, willow actually roots if you lay it on the ground, if the ground is wet. No doubt about it. And you can put down a 2-inch section of a willow, or you can put down a 9-inch or 15-inch section. It will root right there. Sycamore doesn't root very well at all. Sweet gum has root potential, often after you cut it, but that's about it. Wood density, of course, most of this material, why it is negative for saw timber potential and high quality type potential, is because the fact of the matter is the wood density of eastern cottonwood through willow and hybrid poplar are very low. Now selections have been made, and we have some cottonwood that's as high as about 0.42, which is fairly high for eastern cottonwood, and that's a little bit different there. But for the most part, eucalyptus, because of the species utilization of species, has a little higher amount of density. So that gives you a sort of a graph, that you can select and utilize for your particular sites. If I use, for example, let's say populus, what are the advantages of generally, let's say eastern cottonwood? First of all, the growth rates, very, very good. And you have to still match the species to the site. The ease of cloning is very easily done. Vegetative propagation with sticks. Coppicability, is very effective, and it has a considerable amount of variation in disease resistance. So the clones that you select, if I'm wanting one clone, like say 110412, which has basically its best resistance to it, or you want a clone like 1104, which has disease susceptibility but grows extremely rapidly at a young age. And you can get around the actual disease resistance to it. And of course, you have a lot of improved genetics and continue to see improved genetics along the line. The disadvantages for cottonwood is if I'm planting a cottonwood stand, I'm planting on some very good ground. For us, the batcher ground, the ground between the levee and the river, are excellent areas to be needed. Disease susceptibility, especially for the leaf diseases, is critical to take care of. It has very poor drought tolerance, although I will have to say the eastern Texas material out of Brazos River has very good drought tolerance as well. Planting stock is very easily, very difficult to to get with aspen, because you cannot clone aspen as well. And we really need a long-term breeding program, which we really haven't had, because most of our breeding programs are based on short-term aspects. So we look at, keys to increasing the yields of a short rotation woody crops. And again, we're talking about all the species now. And the first thing you need is, what type of planting stock is the best for your particular species? Is it a bare root 1.0 seedling, or we want dormant unrooted cuttings? Or do we use dormant rooted cuttings? Or do we use in-leaf rooted cuttings? Nevertheless, whatever, you have to understand that no matter what type of planting stock you want, the whole key is I have to have survival somewhere between 95 to 100%. And everyone would look at it, in most cottonwood cases, they would say survival usually around 80%. And I can tell you at Westvaco, when we were planting that material, we started off at about 80% survival. By the time we got to where we wanted to be, we very seldom had a tree that died the first 10 years. Storage methods, dormant unrooted cuttings, both in willow and in cottonwood, we hold them below freezing. We hold them at 28 degrees. We hold sycamore at 28 degrees below freezing. It doesn't hurt these hardwood trees to be held at below freezing. In fact, you can hold them up to a single full year, and it allows you to plant year-round if in case you want to plant year-round. In the case of Westvaco, we did plant for every month of the year except for August in order to get the adequate amount of material on the ground that we wanted to, because sometimes you're just faced with flooding situations on batcher ground that you have to take advantage of when the actual soil is right. So you need increased knowledge of silviculture techniques and tree physiology. We have to look at, more chemical site preparation, control of both our perennial vines as well as our weeds, because if you forget about your vine problem, you'll be inundated with your vine problem, and you won't have any trees at the end of the first year. Oh, they'll be there. They'll be under the vine problem. That's why if you read old reports from the Center of Bottomland Hardwoods, they have what they call the vine stage in your bottomland hardwoods. It takes anywhere between 5 to 20 years to come out, of the vine stage. A good case in point, Anderson Tully had a piece of land up on Donaldson Point, and Donaldson Point was cut, and then they sold it to the state of Missouri. I drove by that every year to get to my stands on Island 10, the southern part of Donaldson Point. By the time we harvested 2 stands of eastern cottonwood, the first cottonwood is popping its head up, after y'all had actually cut. So, yeah, you can, there is control that's needed on vines, and you better be cognizant of that fact. Chemical for plantation establishment, more is particularly needed. Actually, gold for a vine works out very good. If you have your morning glory that comes in, you can actually spray your morning glory with your gold later on as a post-emerge, and does a very good job. Understanding really the physiological dynamics with, in case of rooting, leaf physiology, nutrient cycling, water relation is key to what we're actually doing within our programs to actually increase our yields. If we start off with genetics, clone selection in the past has been really clonal refinement. And you look at this particular slide, this is actually what we term clonal refinement, where we have clones that we vegetatively reproduce, and those individuals are just tested out there among other clones that we find that are very good. And those clones are basically moved quickly into what we call the, I have a missing slide here. So there it is right there. I have to go back to the others. But if you look at the far right-hand side, selected genotypes, clone refinement goes straight into deployment. That's the only thing that you have to look at. And you can define basically on early age selection for your material. By age 4, I can tell you exactly what the best clone would be at about a 97, 98% rate for age 10. At age 4, I can tell you at age 2 what the best clone would be in that particular area. But at age 1, we get nothing from it whatsoever. So moving from clone refinement, we are in the stage today, the old material that we have from the Center for Bottomland Hardwoods and other individuals like Westvaco and others that had tested individuals through vegetative production, we're into the breeding of selected particular clones. And today at Mississippi State, we do this, and we do it in a greenhouse. It's basically not a very difficult thing to do, at least the techniques we developed have been very, very good. We make our selections in January, or we actually make our collections in January. We put them in pots. We root the material under freezing type of conditions, and then we actually start breeding them. It takes about 4 months from the time you actually make the first pollination to the time we actually capture the seed. And so what we're shooting for is really a combination of genetics and silviculture. And no matter what you really do, no matter what part of forestry you do in it, if you forget about the silviculture aspects of it, you'll never reach the potential that you want within your genetic program. We're shooting for very high survival rates, increased disease resistance, and we also look at increased leaf retention. That's one thing. We like to see our trees go all the way into December with leaves on them. The longer there are actually leaves on them, the actual longer they produce food nutrients into the root systems and give them a better shoot, the better shot for next year as well, faster growth rates. And we need greater adaptability to sites and stress conditions. Some of the gains that you can make through, and we look at genetic gains in both silviculture in this case. We started at Westvaco with a 12-year rotation. We were getting about 8 green tons per acre per year. Added our better genetics, added our better silviculture down the line. We shot at a 10-year rotation for about 12 green tons per acre per year. And by the time around 2005 rolled around, we were harvesting our 8-year-old stands and get 17 green tons per acre per year. And that's at a 12 by 12 foot spacing. And the fact of the matter is, what you see in the picture is actually an 8-year-old stand. Those trees are going to average 10 inches in diameter and somewhere in the neighborhood about 75 foot at 8 years. So the growth rates are there. And this is another picture of that same stand. The uniformity is there. The survival is there that we wanted. The height, I would say, would be the only thing I wasn't impressed by, because I would like to see about 80-something foot of height growth, and we wanted to do something about that. But okay, what can we do? Better crossing, and we did this, and we continue to do this and continue to shoot for it today, as we're looking at diameter growth of at least 2 inches a year is what we're taking into consideration, and higher density levels, not density levels of 0.32, but density levels that reach 0.40. So this is actual one clone, and you can see I've actually eliminated the actual clone number from there. It's 10 inches at DBH at age 5. And so we would expect to see the same thing in our breeding program as we move along. There's no doubt we can reach that in a very, very short period of time, since we've already done it in a lot of cases. But really, when you look at biomass today, it was originally all hardwoods, and really we can't think about just hardwoods anymore. You still need loblolly pine, and some of the programs that you see, especially in the biofuel industry, basically actually focuses on lignin. It does not focus on cellulose itself. And so the highest lignin content would be in the conifer species, not in the hardwood species. So we look at loblolly pine as being one of those components that we can very easily use in our program. In fact, Kiora, which was in Mississippi, which is in default right now, but Kiora was using nothing but loblolly pine first thinnings that came off of actual warehouser type of land out there, warehouser land. So, but we need to really involve all disciplines, especially I think biotechnology, to meet our U.S. renewable energy needs down the road. Hybrid poplars, we have shown this to do well on non-alluvial sites and a little better on upland sites. In other geographic areas outside of the South, if I move all the way to South Carolina, the septoria, for some odd reason, the disease is not there at this particular time. So we move up hybrid poplars more for the upland situations in the particular South. However, this does not negate the area. What happens when we scale up? What happens to the disease then? So we have to be cognizant of that effect as well. So unfortunately, disease has been the greatest stumbling block to hybrid poplars in the South. This is actually a picture of a 9-year-old NM6 stand, and you can see that it's ravaged by disease. It grew very fast up to 9 years of age, but really not a lot of good material. When we cut the wood out here, most of the trees were about 85 to 90% punky wood in those particular trees at that time. Not suitable. So we looked at hybrid poplars, and you can look at the soil underneath both my research associates' foots there. You can see that one of them doesn't really fit where you would think poplars would be growing, and that would be the red soil. That is on Pontotoc area. That is on a soil that is very droughty type of soil, very lax fertility as well on that. The other one happens to be in Missouri on the not on Lewis protected type of ground up there. You see, in both cases, though, we're getting good first-year growth. So what will it take for us to get 2, 3, or 4 years growth and still remain in that particular height? The first year, you see deltoides reaching 9 foot on the upland site, but the DM hybrids, it's a deltoides crossed with a Japanese poplar, actually reaching 12 foot of growth at that particular time. If we look at alluvial sites, you can see these are 2-year-old cottonwood. The one on the far left is a 2-year-old eastern cottonwood. And then the one on the other side, which is interesting, is in the foreground, in between where my research associate is standing, is hybrid poplar that actually lost all of its leaves due to septoria, leaf disease, early in the growing season. And you can see deltoides behind it. So again, be cognizant of the disease problems that would exist. Willows, we've been working on willows since about 2010, and primarily the reason why I've been working on that is to actually look for shallow, those areas that have heavy clay soils that are poorly drained. And we get some good growth rates of it, but like I said, we've got about 25 clones right now out of about 250 that look very promising, but they all come from East Texas. And unlike what Mike told you, I can move clones from East Texas all the way into Kentucky. And that's not that's a 10-year rotation at that. And they grow very well at that type of move. Now, can I move everything else that far? Probably not. But I don't want to move clones southward at all. Never move a clone from north to south. Never. You will result in poor growth, as well as disease susceptibility. Here's the second-year black willow. The problem I have with that, I don't see any closure going on within that. So the last thing we want to talk about is biotechnology, genetic engineering. We've achieved it. We've already had it there. It's in populace. It's actually in eastern cottonwood. It sits on the shelf. We have ALS resistance out there. We have Roundup resistance out there. We have BT been placed into the tree. Growth genes have been placed into the tree. So it's out there right now. Traits such as herbicide resistance would give us really the key that we need to lower our establishment costs. That would be the key aspect of it all. But the risk is there, and the risk is from an engineered gene from what people say will move into the natural population. I argue the fact that even if it moves into the natural population, provides no selective advantage whatsoever in the natural population. There's no one in the world that's going to spray the whole area with the whole population with Alstor, Arsenal, or Escort to start off with. No one would do that, and the government wouldn't let you do that. So herbicide resistance for glyphosate has been completed. We know it's there. We can estimate. I'll just give you the estimated cost, short version of it. Basically, I can reduce $240 down to about $40 per acre is what it costs to establish the stand. This is what it looks like. There's the beginning of, on the far right is the actual when we didn't put any herbicide down. Any trees were not treated with a gene in there. And then on your right, you see the herbicide-resistant trees. So, eucalyptus is very similar. We have to we put a gene for coal harness in, and they actually survive very well, but they do have a limit. You can't go below 20 degrees in that. So, pine has its advantages. There's no doubt about it. It has all the genetic capability out there as well that we need. So, but we cannot utilize that genetic capability because it is a very costly item to put in your plantations. So in summary, production in the South is a key component to producing renewable energy, and it has to include woody fiber. There's no doubt about it. And then short rotation woody crops and what I'm terming as high density pine plantations will need to be met to possible demands meet the demands for our bioenergy and biofuel needs in the future. So with that, I'll ask any questions or one question. So this last little slide I took because it actually incorporates GMO eucalyptus right next to a GMO aspen growing down in South Mississippi, almost on the coast. You don't very seldom see aspen and eucalyptus growing side by side. Any questions? Sure.
How much money do you get per ton for this product, and what does it cost to?
It's going to be similar to pulpwood, prices, and whatever your pulpwood prices in that particular area for hardwoods, that's what you would be getting from the pellet manufacturers right now. What's that?
Harvesting cost.
Harvesting cost is a little higher than what it was. It's about $12, basically a ton, and it's delivered about $25 or so. The cost. So with Enviva though, they chip it up right up at the site, which would lower the cost as well, and they go straight from there. But they use also whole tree, but it has to be a little bit of a mixture because the ash content in the leaf system, if you do it during the growing season, is a little higher than what's needed. The ash content is a big thing because when it ships to the UK, you have to be below 3% ash in that, and the ash would come from fine soils. That's why they're not harvesting during any type of rain event or anything. And sometimes in your bark where sand or soil would actually collect on the bark as well. Yes, sir. Yeah, it's a drop-in fuel that's what we're shooting for more than ethanol. Ethanol is a mixture, and you're going to have to mix it outside the agency. So you're in the petrochemical industry, it has to come in and then be mixed. It's not one that's being mixed within the refinery itself, in turn. Is in Chattanooga? And doing biobutanol? Yeah. And there's one in Missouri as well, with making biobutanol as well. So the original AFRI grants that were put out 2 years ago, the aspect was to move away from ethanol for utilization more to biobutanol and to jet fuel. Mainly the whole aspect of it has not been really for the consumer much. It's been more for security reasons, more for the Navy, more for the Air Force is what the movement has been for. And that's why it goes through DOD or DOE programs.
We better hold our questions here. We'll have a break here in a little while to give you another opportunity for questions here. All right. Thank you, Randy.
Great job.